Well, Lynn and I are going to shift now to talk about benevolence funds. There have been major changes in recent years in how these funds are understood, both in terms of a more narrowly defined purposes that are permitted, and also in terms of how these funds are properly administered. A benevolence fund is used to assist people in need and to support both individuals and organizations engaged in mission and ministry. And that's why we choose to call it now a benevolence fund and no longer use the term discretionary fund, because the term discretionary fund obviously implies that the fund may be used for any purpose that at the rector's sole discretion. And that is no longer what the IRS permits. And using that term leads to misunderstanding and even misuse by the clergy. As our diocesan benevolence policy states, it is not appropriate for the benevolence fund to be used for the rector's ministry expenses, such as books, journals, clergy clothing, or vestments, etc. A professional expenses line item should instead be established in the budget for such items. And sadly, I'm personally aware of clergy who've gotten into trouble with the IRS and with the people of their church, and ultimately removed from ministry for misusing such funds. As Lynn will explain, it is so important to set up a benevolence fund properly if you choose to have one. Some churches don't have them at all, but set it up as a fund of the church subject to accountability and auditing, and not as a separate checking account handled only by the priest. I know old habits die hard, and some of our churches may still be operating under old principles which are no longer appropriate. If that's the case in your church, you need to push on this. Be the second lieutenant confronting the colonel or whatever you need to do. You are not calling the rector's ethics into question. You're actually protecting the rector and protecting the church from potential problems, as well as from possible criticism for how these funds are handled. So over to you, Lynn.
Thank you. So as Bishop John mentioned, the way that the IRS views benevolence funds has resulted in some important changes in the way churches should handle these accounts. So I've pulled together a few quick slides on the common pitfalls and best practices with regard to these funds. We don't want you to face any financial penalties. So here I have a brief outline of a benevolence fund that the IRS would in fact consider taxable income to your clergy person. This would be a fund that is within the total control of your clergy, a fund that can be used by the clergy person for personal expenses, as Bishop John mentioned, a fund that has no oversight from the church and is outside the regular internal controls of the church. All of that, the IRS would deem this as taxable income, and that person would be liable not only for the taxes, back taxes, but also for any penalties. DOMA strongly recommends that our churches follow the benevolence fund policy and procedures that are found on our website. A little later, Heidi will be sharing with you a page that we've put together with resources for treasurers, and there's a link to this benevolence fund policy. This policy contains best practices that are going to keep you and your clergy person out of trouble. We recommend that you hold funds in the church's bank account, not a separate bank account. We recommend that you establish an equity or designated fund as the rector or clergy person's benevolence fund. So all contributions and disbursements will go into and out of this fund. You want to disperse the funds from this account by means of your regular check request process, and these should be approved in the normal manner. Should a vestry nevertheless establish a separate checking account, here are some things you need to make sure you include. It is to be established in the church's name and not the rector's. It should be established using the church's employer ID number. The rector is one of the authorized signers, but we would recommend that at least 2 others from the church, such as the treasurer and senior warden, also be signatories on this account. To download the PDF version of our benevolence fund policy, you can go to this website on your screen. I would encourage all of you to go to the website and check it out. The policy contains a separate vestry resolution that establishes a benevolence fund account, as well as a sample vestry resolution outlining the policy and procedures for the account. So these are templates and you can customize them according to your church's needs, but we've taken a lot of work out of it for you, and I hope you'll find these resources helpful.